Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Royal Town Planning Institute Grampian Chapter. My name is Donna Lang, and I am the current convener of the Grampian Chapter. This afternoon, we have the pleasure of being joined by SUZANNE MACKRELL from KEPPIE Design and David Telford from Sonas Energy. SUZANNE and David are going to share a presentation on TECA, the Events Complex Aberdeen, and talk with us about TECA's approach to being net zero. We aim to end today's presentation at 4:45 to allow 15 minutes for questions and answers at the end. So please make use of the question function on the system. Any questions we cannot get through today will be passed to Suzanne and David, and we'll get in touch with you via email. The presentation and Q&A session will be recorded today and uploaded onto the RTPI YouTube channel. There'll be a short survey sent out to you at the end of the presentation to gather your feedback on how today went. So it'd be great if you could just fill that in for us. But that's enough from me. I'm now going to pass over to Suzanne. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. So I'll start with a quick introduction, a little bit of background about KEPPIE, who we are and what we do. So we're an architectural practice founded in 1854. Charles Rennie Mackintosh is famously a previous partner of the practice. Currently Scotland's largest architectural resource with just under 100 staff. We offer services in architecture as well as town planning, interior design and urban design services. And we offer extensive experience in healthcare, education, leisure and commercial sectors. And we were recently voted #1 architect in Scotland again this year on Urban Realm. A wee bit of background about myself. So I'm associate architect at KEPPIE. I've been there for just over 15 years, specialising in large-scale leisure, entertainment and sports projects. I was personally involved in the TECA project for a period of around 5 years. From 2014 through to 2019 when the project completed last August. So some of my other recent roles since the handover of TECA include the Hampden Vision project, which is a project for the potential future development of Scotland's National Stadium. Some expansion plans for the SEC campus in Glasgow, which myself and David are currently looking at, and we submitted recently the outlined planning permission for that. And also the transformation of that same campus into the NHS Louisa Jordan Temporary Hospital facility earlier this year, which made for quite a few busy weeks at the beginning of lockdown. So I'll just pass over to David now to give you a quick overview on Sonas Energy.
Afternoon all. Well, I established Sonas Energy in July 2016. Specifically to support the development of embedded and decentralised energy systems. It's a micro-enterprise and it builds on many of the concepts established for TECA. But our work's mostly around Masterplan, energy and sustainability strategy and energy systems concept work, particularly around pathways to net zero. We've got a number of commissions around defining deliverable trajectories to net zero in heat, power and transport. And then particularly looking at the opportunities for cross-coupling between sectors. But next slide, Suzanne. Well, I started work as a physicist in the nuclear industry, working at Dounreay on the fast breeder reactor, but I'm now an energy and sustainability specialist. In the late 80s, I started a specialist sustainability consultancy called Factor 10. Sustainability at that time was a niche market and we called it industrial environmental management. I then took Factor 10 into the multidiscipline consultancy Hurley Palmer Flack to become their energy and sustainability division based in Scotland. And I worked with Henry Boot developments through the initial concept stages for TECA and were then innovated to Robertson's to design and build the energy centre, 5 years from initial concept to commissioning. Recent roles are a smart microgrid with net zero trajectory for Westlake Science Park near Whitehaven and work on hydrogen biofuel supply systems for decarbonising HEVs. And I'm currently working on with SEC with Suzanne on the net zero trajectory for the Scottish Exhibition Campus. Okay, Suzanne.
Okay, thanks David. So the agenda, a rough format for our presentation today. It's obviously quite difficult to condense 5 years project experience into 1 hour or 45 minutes, but we'll try and keep it concise and following cover the following items. So I'm sure some of you on the call will be familiar with the project. However, I'll begin with a quick project overview covering the main features of the venue before David takes you through the energy strategy, the good stuff in a bit more detail. I'll then focus on some site-specific design features, including the reuse of existing materials and how these were incorporated into the design of TECA. And then to end the presentation, we'll reflect on some lessons learned, with David hopefully providing some valuable insights into how we can look to achieve net zero on future projects. So without further ado, the Event Complex Aberdeen, including the P&J Live Arena, is the most sustainable venue of its kind in the UK currently. A key part of the design concept was to develop a venue that would set an example for future sustainable development within the Aberdeen region and beyond. The facility is rated BREEAM Excellent, and the two key elements of the energy strategy are the onsite energy centre and anaerobic digestion plant, which powers not only the TECA venue, but also the two on-site hotels and potentially the wider Masterplan area in the future. So 98% of all materials have been reused on site, and the creation of a very unique parkland setting for the venue has resulted in an enhanced living environment, which is designed to attract both people and wildlife to the area. We have the largest hydrogen fuel cell installation in the UK, and also TECA is part of an ambitious hydrogen transport project that will fuel public transport buses to and from the venue. So a bit of background on Aberdeen's vision for the facility. TECA is truly a transformational development for the city of Aberdeen. This unique facility provides highly flexible state-of-the-art accommodation, creating a contemporary world-class facility that will attract major national and international artists and events to Aberdeen. The existing AACC venue on the right, which was built back in the 80s, I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with it, it was looking a bit tired, outdated, and just no longer fit for purpose. It was also too small, as highlighted on the bottom right image when Offshore Europe event rolled into town just a few years ago. So Offshore Europe, for those who aren't familiar, is a large energy, oil and gas exhibition which occurs every 2 years in Aberdeen. And at the old AACC venue, a sea of temporary structures and tents had to be erected to facilitate the exhibition. So a new, larger venue was required to ensure that Aberdeen not only retained the Offshore Europe exhibition, but also maintained its status as the energy capital of Europe. This also gave Aberdeen an opportunity to showcase renewable technologies and reflect that ambition to create the most sustainable venue of its type in the UK. So over the next 10 years, it's estimated that an additional 4.5 million visitors, 113 million visitor spend and 63 million net GVA to the Scottish economy as a result of this new facility. So the next slide, I'm just going to play a very short video animation which we originally prepped for a public consultation event. It just gives a good overview of the main features of the project. So hopefully this will play. Yep. So the location of the site is situated just south of Aberdeen International Airport. The Masterplan context with the TECA venue sitting within a parkland setting as part of a mixed-use wider Masterplan development. Central to this is the creation of a green-roofed subterranean car park, which doubles up as additional exhibition space, and a central landscaped plaza, which the main entrance of the building faces onto. So if we go inside the building, on ground floor, we have a central concourse which ties together the three main exhibition halls and the adjoining 4-star Hilton Hotel. At the other side of the building, we have the P&J Live Arena with VIP boxes wrapping around at first floor level, a central restaurant along with various conference suites and meeting facilities which also tie into the 200-bed Hilton Hotel at the end there. Above the arena, we have an additional level of fixed seating at the second floor, and then the arena itself has retractable seating at ground floor, offering a flexible event space that holds up to 15,000 people for a live event. And this makes it largest indoor arena in Scotland, just pipping the SEC Hydro in Glasgow to the post there. So in terms of site location, the site is approximately 150 acres. It was home to the former Rowett Research Institute at University of Aberdeen, and under contract to the developer Henry Boot Developments. The Rowett were relocating to a brand new campus, thus creating an opportunity for significant redevelopment and regeneration of the Masterplan area. So it's approximately 6 miles of northwest of Aberdeen city centre, and just south of the airport there, as you can see on the diagram, bounded to the A96 by the south and in close proximity to the new AWPR route. Project timeline, in November 2013, Henry Boot Developments were selected by Aberdeen City Council as their preferred development partner. I kind of came on board when KEPPIE were appointed around September 2014 to progress a PPIP master plan, as well as a detailed application for the new TECA building and the adjoining 200-bed hotel. So we submitted the planning application in August 2015, and it was approved December of the same year, so a really smooth process there. And just a year later, Robertson Construction Group were appointed as main contractor to deliver the project, and then after a 3-year construction period, the project was successfully completed in August 2019. So the new facility represents phase 1 of the wider TECA master plan, acting as a catalyst for the regeneration of the Rowett site and the surrounding areas. So phase 1 includes the TECA building itself, as well as this flexible subterranean car park that can also be used for exhibitions, 200-bed 4-star Hilton hotel, which is physically joined to TECA, as well as an energy centre and anaerobic digestion facility, which David will go into much more detail in the next section. Car parking, open space, parkland, landscape and public realm areas, as well as an additional 150-bed 3-star hotel for the facility. So future phases as part of the PPIP, there's potential for around 60,000 square metres additional commercial development with integrated leisure use, and hopefully another 150-bed hotel in the pipeline too. So in terms of the interior of the TECA building, there's a variety of highly flexible state-of-the-art accommodation that's offered, the main space being that arena, that 9,000 square metres arena, which provides 15,000 maximum capacity for live events. We've also got a variety of exhibition halls, 6,000 square metres of main halls subdivisible into 3, and then you've got this mammoth subterranean space, which provides an additional 33,500 square metres of exhibition space and can be used for large events such as offshore Europe. The subterranean space has a green roof and living walls, which tie it nicely into the landscape design and into that public plaza in front of the main entrance. And then on the upper levels, we have a variety of conference facilities, all offering state-of-the-art AV conference technology. So the project was delivered in BIM 3D modelling. BIM just stands for Building Information Modelling, and it's essentially a method of coordinating project information using a common data environment. So bringing together of all information from all different project disciplines into one single point of reference. So models from different disciplines that we then collate and collaborate together. So for example, we've got the structural engineers model, which has all the different steel and concrete elements modelled. Layer on top of that, the mechanical engineers components, so the building services model. And then on top of that, we layer on the building envelope. So this results in a fully coordinated architectural 3D model. Now this 3D model information can be used to create a physical model using potentially 3D printing technology, which KEPPIE offer in-house. So this model on screen is actually a physical model we prepared for early discussions with Aberdeen City Council planning and also Architecture and Design Scotland workshops. And it was really a great tool to allow us to assess the visual impact of the building mass in 3 dimensions from concept stage. Physical models, I find, are a really good tool for things like public consultation events, where members of the public can really fully engage. They can pick it up as something they can see, they can touch, they can feel and understand. And I think the next image shows just how accurate those early 3D models were and how the end result has stayed pretty true to that original design concept. So the 3D model information also allowed us to develop a series of key views as agreed with Aberdeen City Council Planning Department as part of the planning submission. The images produced for planning were also used for marketing purposes and featured quite heavily in the local press. Now, from an architectural point of view, this was very advantageous to us, as when the contractor came on board and inevitably we entered into some value engineering discussions. We always had this solid set of photorealistic baseline images that we could refer back to, and this ensured the original design intent was not compromised. So from a personal point of view, I must say this project is one I'm most proud of when I look back at comparing the initial CGI imagery with the end result. So I've got a series of quick images here in 2015 planning images versus 2019 as-built photographs, just to show you the difference. So we've got the main arena angled facade from the west, the main entrance portico and the public plaza, and then a view of the Hilton Hotel gable from the south. So with a project of this size and scale, it's sometimes quite difficult to get your head around just the sheer magnitude of the spaces you're dealing with. So just a bit of fun here, we've pulled together a few random facts to hopefully give you some idea of the sheer scale of the development. So I'll just rattle through these. The TECA building is 30.5 metres high, just over 418 metres long. If you placed the seats in the arena end to end, it would stretch for over 6,000 metres. It would take 89 Olympic-sized swimming pools to fill that subterranean space. The arena alone could hold up to 718 billion Smarties. I'm not sure who worked that out. And then a network of over 7 kilometres of new footpaths serve the site, connecting to the surrounding areas. And then importantly, green open space with the new parkland setting equaling the size of 14 football pitches. So TECA opened its doors in August 2019 and had a very successful first few months before COVID inevitably put on the brakes. So offshore Europe did take place there in September 2019. There was then a series of really successful live events, including Liam Gallagher in November. BBC Sports Personality of the Year was hosted there in December. And then Lewis Capaldi's sold out gig went ahead just a couple of days before lockdown in March 2020. So P&G Live now holds the record for the largest indoor arena gig ever held in Scotland, when Jerry Cinnamon played there in November last year to 15,000 people. But I guess what really makes TECA so unique in all of this is that all of these events are powered sustainably, as David will describe in a bit more detail now as he explains the energy strategy concept for the development and then how this was achieved. So David, over to you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Okay, we'll make a start. First slide really is where we started. As energy and sustainability consultant in the project, I was responsible for the energy strategy, but also for the sustainability strategy. And as Suzanne explained, the brief included the requirement for the most sustainable venue of its kind in the UK. Now, this was over 5 years ago, before the declaration of the climate emergency, but there was plenty of guidance and an established policy framework. For the energy strategy, our key was Energetica. The site sits at the bottom of the Energetica corridor, and that's the strategy for that area of Aberdeen, going up right up to up towards Peterhead. At that time, Aberdeen City had also launched its first hydrogen strategy, but a key local element was Aberdeen City Council's Sustainable Building Standards for council controlled building. Taken together, all of this meant that we were going beyond compliance. The client had specified BREEAM Excellent, and the aspiration for a low carbon solution was there from the start. And our sustainability statement included elements of BREEAM, included some of the planning conditions around sustainability, included the energy strategy, but it also had economic and social sustainability targets and goals. And that sustainability statement then became a contract document for Robertson's to help deliver and maintain the vision for sustainability right through the whole process. Okay, next slide. Right, turning now to the energy strategy itself. It's quite a busy slide, but it shows the energy centre in the centre feeding the 3 buildings of TECA and the 2 hotels. It's when we started looking at the energy centre for TECA, it's quite a difficult building to provide renewables for, got a very peaky demand. In addition to that, the location, although great, it's actually not very good for renewables because of the proximity to the airport. So solar and wind were very restricted. The obvious solution was for a gas-fired CHP, but Aberdeen City wanted to push further and go beyond a fossil fuel solution. So we took this whole system approach with the Trigen Energy Centre in the centre, which delivers heat, power and cooling to the building. But the renewable source of energy is the Anaerobic Digestion Plant, which is shown in the diagram. And it feeds green gas to the gas grid, but also a direct pipe down into the energy centre. The AD plant itself was sized to be larger. It was going to take Aberdeen City food waste, but it was larger than that. It's a co-fuel plant, and it provides sufficient gas for the energy centre through both those routes, from the gas through the grid and directly. So it takes Aberdeen City's food waste along with purpose-grown crops, and provides the fundamental energy for the setup. Within the energy centre, we have the largest static hydrogen fuel cells, and we also have the on-site electrolyser and hydrogen production. Because the energy centre itself has actually got a very, very peaky demand, you can imagine that you heat the place prior to people arriving, then when we've got thousands of people at a conference or a show, the demand can switch to cooling. So what we have are large thermal stores, a hot store and a cold store. These are charged from the hydrogen fuel cells, either directly or running through an absorption chiller, and then the peak demand is met from the spark ignition CHP units that are within the energy centre. Any supplementary power can be exported back into the grid, but we also utilise some of the surplus power to produce hydrogen for the buses in Aberdeen through the on-site electrolyser. Okay, next slide. This is a kind of simpler view of the energy concept. So on the input side, we have the fuel, crops, biological waste, and so on, moving into the anaerobic digestion plant. It produces gas to the grid and produces a direct supply to the power generation of the energy centre. And it then is producing electricity, heat, cooling, and hydrogen fuel. We now look at how it's realised in practice. It's very difficult to get a good picture of it because it's a long building and it's very well blended into its environment. But the design of it is the result of trying to meet a number of design requirements. First of all, from an engineering point of view, it needs to be near the arena to minimise the pipe runs for the large capacity heat and cooling pipes. And energy centres are usually square blocks, but this one is long and accommodates 3 separate areas. It's quite a complex energy centre. So we have, at the right-hand side of the picture, the gas boilers and gas-fired CHP in noise-proof enclosures. We've then got the middle section, which is all the outdoor plants, which are static fuel cells, electrolyser, and the large thermal stores. And then the left-hand side of the image, there is the chiller room with the electric and absorption chillers. The design of the long footprint building was suggested by KEPPIE to give us that location close to the arena, but also to provide screening and enclosure to the back of house area of the conference centre. But from an M&E perspective, this long layout actually worked beautifully. allowed us to have a service bus running right along the back elevation of the buildings and all the plant hanging off this. Okay, next slide. Some pictures of the actual component part. So on the left, not very photogenic, but we have the hydrogen fuel cells. They're containerized, and there's not an awful lot to see. There's the boxes that sit there. And on the right-hand side, the spark ignition gas CCHP engine. Next slide. This is an internal shot of the heating and cooling plant. So the three large gas boilers, so the three 1 megawatt gas boilers with that supplement the heating from the fuel cells and CHP units. And on the right-hand side, the top right is the absorption chiller, and the bottom right are the electric chillers. Okay, next slide. This is the hydrogen production facility. So the electrolyzers are the picture in the middle at the top. Inside, that's what they look like, is the sort of large electrolyzer stacks. And the picture to the right is the hydrogen storage facility. It's not a huge hydrogen production facility, but it's enough to allow the fuel cells themselves to run in the evening to charge the thermal stores. It produces around 200 kilograms of hydrogen a day. And what does 200 kilograms of hydrogen equate to? Well, if you're using buses, it's about 2,600 bus kilometres per day. So that's roughly equivalent to 10 buses doing about 250 kilometres each. A typical bus does around 7.5 miles per gallon, and in hydrogen terms, that's about 12 kilometres per kilogram of hydrogen. Okay, next slide. The engineering also was done under BIM, so there's what could be called a digital twin. And there's just a couple of shots showing the digital twin at the top and the practical realisation at the bottom. So the pictures on the left-hand side are a view along this large, the large services duct that effectively runs the length of the building. And the other four pictures are in the outdoor area. The middle ones being the thermal stores, and the ones on the right-hand side, the hydrogen fuel cells. Okay. But also within the modelling, and from the early stages right through the design stages, we did extensive modelling of the technical and financial operation of the energy centre. It's a fairly complex set of equipment, and the key challenge really is to model a full year, taking into account the way in which the arena, the auxiliary halls and hotels would be operated with the exhibitions and other types of events, and look at how this would be, how the heat, power and cooling demands would be affected by seasonal and daily demand profiles. This allowed us to do the initial plant sizing and then check how the plant and how the various components of the energy centre would interact with each other and optimise the design. At the concept stage, we modelled a lot of different sizing options for the AD plant, the static hydrogen fuel cells and CHP, and conducted life cycle costings to combine the operational costs with revenues from the environmental support schemes for renewable heat incentive and feed-in tariff that was available for different parts of the components. And that was very much a sort of moving goalpost as these changed. At that time, it seemed every 6 months. But the idea was to optimise the life cycle costs. The final pictures here are the energy centre from the outside with the CHP stacks at the left-hand side, and the bottom right, the view between the energy centre and the arena through the yard where the trailers can be parked. So this is getting more into SUZANNE's area again, so I'll pass back to her.
Thanks for that, David. So yeah, in this next section, I'm going to focus on just a few key items with regards to site-specific sustainable design features and how these were integral to the planning process. Mainly the reuse of materials reclaimed from demolition of existing buildings on site, and also the creation of green open space and high quality public realm areas within a parkland setting, which is actually quite unique for a development of this type. So the site was once home to the former Rowett Research Institute, University of Aberdeen. This was a mix of research, academic and agricultural buildings constructed mostly between 1920 and 1955. It was added to in a pretty much piecemeal fashion, so we had everything on there from chicken sheds to granite library buildings. One of the conditions of the detailed planning consent was to ensure that all these buildings were recorded and photographed extensively prior to demolition to ensure a historic record of the site. However, it's worth noting none of the buildings were actually listed or within a conservation area. So there's a total of 55 buildings on site to be demolished, of which 6 were constructed of granite and 1 of red sandstone, which again is quite unusual for Aberdeen. So in line with Aberdeen City Council planning policy, retention of granite buildings is encouraged, even if not listed or in a conservation area. However, where a large granite building that is not listed or in a conservation area is to be demolished, the council will expect the original granite to be used on the principal elevations of the replacement building. So the granite was therefore taken down carefully and set aside for reuse within the new development. Another key part of the initial site clearance works was the diversion of the existing green burn, the watercourse which ran through the centre of the site. So yeah, key to the development of the site was the rationalisation of that watercourse. There had been a history of flooding in the Greenburn area, and the redesign of this diverted watercourse would therefore look to reduce the flood risk and improve the water environment moving forward. The diversion of this watercourse created quite a unique opportunity for the creation of a linear park along the southern edge of the site in which the Energy Centre building sits. So structured woodland planting provides screening around the Energy Centre and on parkland, visual integration of the development from the A96, and the development of a comprehensive network of footpaths throughout the parkland enhances the green space network, providing recreational space, strong pedestrian and cycle links between the surrounding communities. So by creating this mixed-use facility within a parkland setting, TECA becomes not only a valuable community asset, but also an important new public place for the City of Aberdeen. So in the creation of this burn corridor parkland, approximately 30,000 new trees and shrubs were planted as part of the first phase of the development. All species had to be agreed in advance with Aberdeen International Airport, using a bird strike mix as part of the bird hazard management plan for airport safety. Due to proximity to the flight path, planting must not provide nesting opportunities for birds, and anyone from Aberdeen on the call will know, given the size of seagulls up there, why that is. And then recycled materials from the demolition of key buildings on the site were then used to create a series of walls, footpaths, way markers, seating and sculptural features along that core path route as part of the public art strategy. So in terms of downtakings, a number of existing key buildings were identified as having suitable stone for granite or granite for reuse within the development. There was a large number of granite blocks of varying quality, shapes and sizes. Some of the buildings had features of particular interest, such as carved stone features or decorative elements, and these were carefully removed and set aside to be integrated into the landscape design. So a number of key locations were identified early on as being suitable for reuse of reclaimed materials within the development. The first was that Energy Centre building, as David described, which sits in the Burn Parkland to the south of the main TECA building, just in the centre of the diagram there. And this was seen as an ideal location for the reuse of the reclaimed granite, as its prominent location and visibility from the A96 could be justified as a principal building elevation in line with the local planning policy. From an architectural point of view, this gave us an opportunity to create something much more than just your usual bog standard typical energy centre building, which, no offence to David, they aren't generally known as being things of architectural beauty. It also meant, selfishly, that we didn't have to find a home for all this reclaimed granite on the main walls of the arena building. Given its futuristic angular nature, I don't think that would have been too successful. So the second key area identified was a zone just south of the hotel, where the main access to the site bridges over the diverted burn. And this is in close proximity to where Strathcona House, the red sandstone building, once stood. So that was identified as an ideal location for use of the reclaimed sandstone elements. And then lastly, a number of stone features were identified to be distributed along the network of footpaths at key junctions designed as part of the public art strategy. So the energy centre itself, south elevation of that energy centre facing onto the Burn Parkland screens the TECA service yard and back of house areas, as David says. So the granite wall itself is approximately 140 metres long by 8 metres high, and it's constructed using a series of avian baskets filled with crushed reclaimed granite blocks. The energy centre also has a green roof system similar to the subterranean space, which is a sedum blanket with Aberdeen airport approved species as part of the bird hazard management plan. And as during demolition some bat roosts were found within the existing buildings, a series of bat boxes are then integrated into the granite wall facing along that burn corridor. So the red sandstone from the demolition of Strathcona House was used then to create a feature wall to bridge over that diverted burn at the south entrance of the site, enhancing the sense of arrival and essentially creating a gateway into the development from the south. These walls were designed with a nod to the angular geometry of the new TECA building, while also reflecting on the history and heritage of what stood there once before. So carved stone features from Strathcona House that had been reclaimed and salvaged had been inserted along the length of that wall to add points of visual interest along the pedestrian journey. And lastly, a number of other salvaged stone features were set aside for reuse within the landscape design, from the feature pediment above the entrance to the Reid Library to the commemorative plaque to Lord Boydor, who was indeed the first director of the Rowett Research Institute. These features were incorporated into the landscape areas along the footpath of the Burn Parkland, designed as part of the art strategy. So key features were used at nodal footpath junctions with granite way markers, giving a nod to the history and heritage of the site. And I think the final image at the bottom right of the screen there shows, in my opinion, the successful integration of the old with the new, with the energy centre central to that in the middle. I think that's quite an apt image to end on. So for me, forward-thinking, sustainable design solutions with a nod to heritage and the sympathetic reuse of those reclaimed materials are really what made this project a success. So I'll now hand you back over to David, who's going to give hopefully some valuable insights into lessons learned on the project from a net zero perspective.
Thanks, Suzanne. Well, 5 years in construction, it's difficult to cover a lot of the aspects of it, but looking back to think about what's the lessons learned, would we do it the same again, or what have we learned from the process? I think the first thing to say is that we started this more than 5 years ago, and at that point net zero was not an aspiration, but achieving the lowest carbon intensity possible was. As it turned out, we did achieve net zero because of the way in which we had to deal with the energy resilience and effectively use the grid for storage. So we export more renewable energy to the grid than we actually use. But the process, what we learned about the actual process? Well, first of all, it is very much a whole systems approach. It's The energy strategy is integrated with the sustainability strategy, as I hope we've illustrated. But the energy strategy itself is a whole systems approach, looking at the demand side, so working with the M&E designers of the hotels and the arena to minimise demand, and in particular to minimise the peak demands and match them to the available energy that we have on site. So the whole systems approach is looking at demand side. It's looking at energy storage and distribution and maximising the energy storage on site, which we have with the thermal stores, and then consideration of the generation side. You know, so how we're going to generate renewable energy and what other resources looking at. I think the thing to say really is that there's no silver bullet. All sites are different. All sites have different constraints. All sites have different resources. But one of the things that is very obvious is that mixed use developments are much easier to get towards net zero than looking at a building in isolation. A single building's demand profiles are what they are, but when you have mixed use, you tend to have more complementary demand profiles, and therefore you can mix and match the energy flows between the buildings. So net zero for a campus is a much easier proposition than net zero for a building. And the more different types of use that are within that overall energy strategy, the easier it becomes. So mixing residential with commercial with industrial makes an awful lot of sense from the sort of carbon trajectory point of view. The other thing I think about is the energy strategy at a campus or a master plan level is that deep decarbonisation, getting towards net zero, is very challenging. You can't do it simply with a little bit of solar and a little bit of wind. And in particular, retrofit as opposed to new build. One of the luxuries here was it was a new build, but net zero for retrofit is much harder. The other thing I think on net zero is that when do we need to get to net zero? We need to understand that the technology is maturing and also the grid itself is decarbonising. So one of the approaches to net zero is to make the building net zero ready rather than net zero at deliverable. You know, if we've got a target of 2045 and we maybe want to get to net zero by say 2035, it might not make economic sense to get to net zero tomorrow for a building you're delivering tomorrow, but the building should be able to get there. The last point I want to make is the example at TECA is it's an integrated approach to heat, power and transport, and the pathways to net zero in transport and heat can then be complementary to the pathway to net zero in energy and transport in particular. If you look at a building in isolation, then looking at the opportunities around transport, you might achieve much lower carbon reductions on the transport side than you can get on the energy, on the sort of power side. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from TECA in terms of delivering net zero, and the fact that it was achieved, and it was achieved in the design that was started 5 years ago, should just show us effectively what can be done. I guess we have to stop now and think about questions, unless you want to add something, Suzanne.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that, David. What I would say is I agree with everything David said there, but what I would say from an architectural point of view, from a design team point of view, sustainability and energy strategy is integral from concept through to delivery. An involvement of an energy specialist such as David, like Sonas Energy, is key at the early stage of a project. As David said, it's not so easy to just tack on at a later stage or retrospectively. And I think we've all got to the point now where throwing a couple of extra PV panels on or a few extra cycle racks just isn't going to cut it moving forward. And totally agree with what David said. Their buildings shouldn't be viewed individually. You have to really see things in the round, in the bigger picture, and site-specific opportunities that you can embrace moving forward. So no, that's great. Thanks for that, David. And yeah, I guess we'll see now if there's any questions.
Hi there, it's Donna again. Thank you so much for that, and thank you for dropping in about the seagulls there, Suzanne. They are, yeah, Aberdeen, the Silver City by the Golden Sands, with the seagulls that could be pterodactyls, but definitely. There's a couple of questions coming in already, so we can maybe start with those, and while we're answering those, if folk want to think about what they want to ask, we can pick those up. So a question came in about how you evolved the sort of development of the site, and how it ended up being as it's shown today. Was there sort of things that changed or moved to accommodate it?
There was a number of site constraints, which a building of TECA's mass, although I said earlier in the presentation, the site, was 150 acres. There's various constraints like the diversion of the watercourse, like the proximity to the flight path, that meant that real mass of the arena could really only sit at a certain point on the site. We couldn't really move it any closer to the flight path, and it's bounded by the A96. So I think, yeah, certain site constraints just unique to that specific site is where we ended up with the master plan as it currently stands. But we certainly tried and tested a number of routes to get there. But yeah, I think it all ended up in that one mass at that particular point of the site due to height restrictions, for example, with the flight path.
Thank you for that. We've got another question. Quite a good one. Here we go. How do you feel the planning system helped TECA to achieve the sustainability and net zero ideals? Did planning help to drive it? And can planning embed this into the norm? So 3 quite chunky questions there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had a really good relationship with planners at Aberdeen City Council, and I think everyone, was focused on achieving that end goal. Certainly having the detailed application, the conditions in there about, about net zero, about the reuse of materials, about the reuse of the sandstone to create features, the public art strategy embedded through all of this, that we worked very closely with the landscape architect. There was conditions in the planning process as well about landscape design and green roofs and seagulls and the type of planting that you could use and you couldn't use. So yeah, I think certainly Aberdeen City Council definitely helped drive that through the planning process, and I think the reuse of all those materials that was entwined through the conditions and through the planning process gave us an opportunity to create something really unique and special here that merges old and new together quite beautifully, I think. Yeah.
Can I just come in on that as well? One of the things that's really interesting from an energy point of view, then, because energy, you can quantify energy and carbon, then that can be controlled quite effectively through the planning process. What is less easy to control through the planning process is trying to move beyond compliance for sustainability, where you're looking for innovation sustainability. And that, I think, is much harder, and to some extent, you can have the aspirations at the start, but you then need somehow to maintain that strive for innovation throughout the design process. And that is much harder to drive from planning, and it's much more driven by the client and the client's aspirations and sign off at various design stages. And I think one of the things that we have to recognise in this, that Aberdeen City as the client, rather than as the planning authority, also had a big role to play in maintaining our vision from the start through to the delivery.
Thank you. Your net zero ready concept, David's kind of caught people's attention. So folks are saying it sounds like a really useful concept, including our thinking of the future. What do you think are the key priorities to make a building net zero ready?
I think one of the things to really recognise is that the trajectory on power is coming down anyway. so that whatever you do, wherever you start, rather than looking at achieving a sort of arbitrary carbon standard on day one delivery, it's almost like you need to show how the carbon trajectory is going to go on a do nothing scenario, and then look at what the gap is going to be at various points into the future, and then set, if you like, for the building what the net zero target date might be, and then define at the design stage how you're going to get there. Don't leave it as very much open, but very net zero ready to me means having declared through the design is how this is going to evolve. So it might be things like you might use gas because it's cheap, but you then have to design the system such that you know when you're going to change over from gas to heat pumps, for example, and where that power is going to come from and what the carbon intensity of that power is going to be. So it's moving from almost like a single point of compliance to being able to, if you like, have an agreed trajectory of where the building's going to go.
So it's almost like a built-in adaptability. Would that be a?
Yes, it is. But it's quite closely defined as to how you're going to do it.
There's another question here that probably ties into that one as well. Are you finding that clients and developers are becoming more open to adapting to a net zero approach, or are you finding there's still a lot of convincing people regarding the benefits of moving towards this?
I think there's certainly a lot of convincing, and there's an awful lot of worry around the cost and the when we're doing energy strategies sort of 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, it was all about, yes, saving energy, saving money, and therefore it's all, in terms of a life cycle costing, it's all pushing in the same direction. The problem we've got now is there's a major tension between the cost of construction and getting to net zero. Deep decarbonisation costs money, and that's where the tension keeps in. And it really depends on whether you've got a client who's absolutely determined to get there, or whether but you've still got an overall cost envelope to meet, and sometimes that tension means you can't. This aspiration for net zero disappears somewhere along the practicalities of getting through financial approvals.
Yeah, again, I think it depends, David, who your client is. I mean, we're both working, I think we both touched on at the beginning there, at the SEC campus in Glasgow. And if anything, SEC have looked to Aberdeen and thought, look what they can do there. They're kind of stuck with, some buildings that have been there since the 1980s, but they're really keen to drive forward, especially since SEC will hopefully be hosting the COP26 next year, and the legacy of COP26 and what that means for the SEC campus and what it means for Glasgow as a city. I think, an SEC client, that's very much top of their agenda moving forward.
At the top of their agenda, because they do need to have a sustainability an energy strategy for that, and they need a real solid story to tell on how they're going to not only for COP26, but increasingly in the marketplace. They're marketing, especially in conference centres, that are marketed on a world basis. And some of the acts are asking about the sustainability credentials. Some of the conferences are asking about the sustainability credentials of the buildings. And with the, if you like, with the standard that's been established at TECA, then that's putting pressure on all other conference venues to think about how sustainable and what the carbon footprint of a specific conference would be.
Yeah.
There's a couple more questions popped in, so I'll maybe try and get through these before we call it a close. So we've got a question asking about how you mitigate about the potential risk about not having enough food waste or feedstock for the AD plant.
That's one of the reasons why it's not a food only plant. When we were looking at this, I had a bit of experience with some other AD plants, and food only, although there's a real pressure from the Environment Agency and from Scottish Government, that and also through the sort of subsidy system that food waste only plants are, are what we should be looking at. We shouldn't be building, using crops for anaerobic digestion. From the point of view of risk mitigation, it makes an awful lot of sense to have co-fuel plants, both from the point of view that as the food waste changes in composition throughout the year, you can compensate that to some extent with various crops, but also the plants themselves are more stable, and gas production is actually much easier to control. And if for whatever reason food waste goes down, then you can bring up the crop side. The crop side, we're not talking about necessarily food crops, and the one in Aberdeen is it's fueled mostly with grass silage, and there's a whole set of issues around that, but the availability of grass silage in the Aberdeenshire area we have had no problem at all getting sufficient fuel for it. And you can go into the marketplace and we can forward buy grass silage, which is a great boon for a lot of farmers in the area, because it gives them assurances of what their income is going to be. So in terms of economic sustainability, it's a very, very sensible sort of mix.
We'll just probably end on this one last question here. We'll quickly squeeze it in. Given how fast energy hydrogen is moving, how do you consider the whole life cycle and reuse of obsolete fuel cells, etc.?
It depends very much on the type of them. The fuel cells for transport, I was doing some work with a company that was looking to manufacture HGVs, and we are very much looking at not selling the fuel cells as part of the vehicle, but leasing the fuel cells specifically so as we get them back, and be able to have control over, if you like, the investment in the precious metal content of the catalyst. I think there's everybody's looking very much at being able to conserve the materials that go into the production of fuel cells.
Right. I think there's a couple of questions we've not quite got to. Maybe catch them up over email, if that's okay, because I'm aware that we're
absolutely
rapidly.
Happy to answer more questions via email. That's absolutely fine.
Great. But I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for taking the time to join us today. For those who are watching us live just now, or for those who are picking us up via the RTPI YouTube channel, at whatever time you're watching it, thanks for spending time with us, and thanks for all the questions. But also thanks to David and Suzanne for taking the time to present to us today and also to answer those questions. I think it's a great building, and hopefully, thankfully, we'll get back into it at some point in time in the future. I've only ever seen it as a building site, so I'd like to see it as a as a live working venue at some point in the future. Absolutely. So we'll pick. Yeah, grand. We'll pick up those couple of questions that we've not got to, and we'll get back to you directly. As I said, there'll be a wee summary questionnaire popping out to you just at the end of the presentation. So it'd be great if you could just fill that in. It's just to give us a bit of feedback about how today went. But all in all, I just want to say thank you so much for everybody for taking time to be with us today, and hopefully we'll see you all again in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Pleasure.